Dev, it's good to see you, man. Last time we talked, you were biking through the city.
I know. Oh man, which is crazy because you can't really do that now. Well, I guess you could, but
probably less safely. I feel like I was amazed by how safely you were navigating the conversation and the bike ride. Yeah, that was like the most impressive part of that.
There's so many moments riding a bike in New York that are these like microsecond moments where you're just kind of like, could I have died just now? You know, like there's like a moment, like it happens every now and then. There's just, you know, because it's like something quick, like it's something just like that. And then I'm kind of just like, yeah, that's not good. I shouldn't be.
How are you surviving the winter? I mean, we talked and it was like summer, and so people were still kind of able to go into the outdoors to do things comfortably. But you know, I know that New York is much like Ohio here, where like it's been less than ideal to be outdoors. How are you surviving?
I'm getting cabin fever. I'm definitely I'm definitely hearing it. I'm hitting that point. But you know, it's like most things in this time period, there's worse scenarios. Like it can always be worse. So I'm fine, but yeah, I mean, what's it like in Ohio?
Right now it's pretty desolate. You know, it's been like the snow's been piling up, and I have a house, so I got a shovel, you know, and I have not enjoyed that because every time I shovel, it snows again. And so I've kind of just been indoors doing puzzles. I decided early on in the winter that I was going to be a puzzle person, despite the fact that I'd never been a puzzle person before.
Wow.
And I'm not very good at them. And so what my house kind of looks like now is like I have a bunch of like half-finished puzzles scattered about. Like in one room there's a Prince puzzle I've been working on. In another room there's another puzzle, and I'm probably never going to finish them, but that's just like a part of the process. I've been playing piano a lot. I got like a little electric piano for my house at the end of summer, and I know how to play, but I hadn't played in a lot of years. And when I sat back down at the piano, it's kind of like muscle memory, but just like slightly worse. You know, it's like, oh, I can still play this song, but it's slower. It's a little bit out of tune, you know? And that's been, yeah, you know? I've been thinking about though, I have a book coming out next month that's in part about dance and movement. And I've been thinking about dance as how it like relates to your work. Oh, you got it. You got a copy. Yeah. I did not realize you had a copy. I was gonna ask who sent you that, but I hope that I don't know. I hope that you've enjoyed it so far.
I've been deeply enjoying it. It's really incredible. It's really incredible.
So thank you. I wanted to ask you about dance because I feel like dance is such a part of how I understand your work, but I also don't know if people talk to you about dance a whole lot, and like your relationship with dance and movement and how that ties into your compositional ability.
People don't talk to me about that ever, really. That's cool. That's cool that you that's like an in for you.
Well, it's because I don't know how to dance, and so I'm an admirer of, and I remember the Better Than Me music video, right? Where I was kind of compelled by the choreography in that. And when I was researching for the book, I did so much reading about how like producers and composers spent time watching dance or immersed in dance to think about the movements of sound. And I was wondering if you had some good thoughts on that as someone who composes, who moves, who's like deeply engaged with themes and thematic presentation.
Well, I think besides a genuine aesthetic love and historical love of dance, on a more like visceral level, writing music is really physical for me. I mean, I kind of, if someone was to watch me making music and everything was on silent, it would look really bizarre. Like my body moves a lot while I'm making it. It's very, yeah, it's just ingrained in kind of in every way. And so dancing always kind of, it was always important for me, especially with the album that song is from, Freetown Sound, because in general that album was about like going deeper into myself, almost like past myself, like so deep it's going past and like back and further back. And so in doing that, physicality became a real focal point. So when it became time for presentation and playing shows and making videos, dance felt like the most natural form of expressing what I was working on. But yeah, it's very, you know, I've always had like such an intense relationship with it. And, you know, I'm also such a sports person, which is also a dance into itself. So physicality, basically, I guess, is the root of all of it for me.
Well, you're a sports person? I had no idea you were a sports person. I mean, I guess I didn't, that doesn't like, what sports are you rocking with?
Oh man, I am I'm like more sports than music. It's like really only like my close friends even like are aware of that because they like know me. No, so when I was growing up, I played football, soccer, and that's what I was going to do, you know, like that was the road. If I kept going down it, it was playing like professional football. And I stopped when I was like stopped in regards to going along the path when I was like 17, and kept playing it because at the end of it, I really just didn't care enough because, you know, as a professional athlete, that's it, you know what I mean? Like there's no other thing that happens. And I did not have that. I found myself in these moments where when I was getting scouted and I was playing for bigger teams, I played so bad. Like it became really crazy. It was almost like a mental thing. I would play awful and then I would feel really awful. And I'll never forget there was a moment where I played for this one team, one of the bigger teams, and I was shockingly bad every time, like, you know, every single time. And a player who was on that team played me against me on another team, and we were playing against each other. And I played really good. I would play really good for like, you know, my school and like the local team. And I remember them being really shocked and coming up to me afterwards and talking about it. And I didn't have an explanation. I think only recently in life I'm able to even have an idea of why that could be. But yeah, football and tennis, hence the
tennis bag.
time.
We got that in common in a way. I mean, I grew up playing football, I grew up playing soccer and played in college, and also realized at a certain point that just wasn't going to be the path. Or I think I realized that I cared most when I played with my friends. And then when you play in college, right? Like when you're playing in college, it's a business and you don't really have control over who you're playing with. And it's like more transient in a way. And it just felt newly exhausting, you know, where it's like, this is no longer the game I grew up loving. But I think in any team sport, like there's a physical dance to it, but I also think there's just an emotional dance of being on a team with people you know, who may not love you, but between the lines for 90 or so, believe in what you're capable of, which is a type of love. So much of the personality of the sports fan too, I think when we talk about like love and affection, so much of that affection is for me and for so many sports fans I know is born primarily out of disappointment because like only one team can win the thing, you know? Exactly. Like that's the math, that's the job, you know? And second place is still disappointing. Maybe not as disappointing as last place, maybe not as disappointing as like relegation, but
yeah, that's disappointing.
but there's still, you know what I mean? Like, I think so much of what fascinates me about sports is that people are drawn to it through hope, but also with a clear understanding of the very large disappointment that looms in a way that I can't think of. I think that maybe my brain has begun to think of every relationship in that way, which is maybe not healthy. But I think romance is like that too, where the part of me that really loves and is ecstatic about the nuances of a new person or the potential for a new person who has yet to be fully uncovered in my life. I don't really obscure that excitement with the potential for heartbreak, but I think that as I get older, I am more aware of the disappointment that rests behind the unknown excitements.
Right. I see that. I get that. It's like it's like Leicester wasting all those years to win the league,
Yeah.
And then when they it's and then when you get it, it's really it.
Yeah. It's a weird trade-off.
I like that. I like that analogy.
Although I hope I'm not too pessimistic about love, perhaps. I feel like I'm a little too young to be too pessimistic about love. But do you consider yourself, which is a perfect segue for me, because I was spending more time, I'm someone who's like listened to your work from Lightspeed Champion to now. And though no two projects are the same, because I think you're so invested in theme and concept, like the shifting of theme and concept, it does feel to me like the one thread that runs through a lot of your work is a thread of romanticism and optimism, though that could be my interpretation. I'm curious if you consider yourself an optimist and a romantic.
Wow, that's really cool. That's cool. Also, thank you for listening to it. Yeah, I think that's accurate, because I kind of well, it's actually interesting because I'm kind of not optimistic as a person, but when I'm working on things, I always want there to be a thread of optimism. Like, I always want there to be something in there. I really don't ever want stuff to just like fully exist like in the weeds or in the pits, or like absolutely cloaked in darkness. Like, I've never wanted that for things that I make. I enjoy things I like that, but when I make stuff, I don't want it to necessarily exist in that place, because I'm always really talking about myself in everything I do, or at least my response to things. So it's never like, I'm never really posing questions and I'm never giving answers. I'm just somewhat reacting and existing. It's like, I guess the optimism comes from like a hopefulness. I'm always, if it's possible to be pessimistic and hopeful, I think that's what I am,
Yeah. I mean, well, I do think, I think that's possible, but I think at the intersection of pessimism and hope is just like a really sometimes abrasive but very necessary relationship with the reality of a circumstance. And I also think that, at least for me, like growing up in the era of America that I grew up in and am still living in now, I think, in being Black, like I think pessimism is a function of being sold one thing in one space. And for me, it was like school, right? Like being sold an idea of America and then being confronted very aggressively with a different version of that America that did not serve me as generously. Like, it's a significantly less generous interpretation of that America. And so I do think some of that pessimism, at least for me, just comes through an ability. One of my elders, an old homie of mine, always says this thing where she's like, I might be cynical, but I'm no fool, And I think it's possible to be optimistic, but also not allow oneself to be a fool, you know?
Yeah, I think that's it. That's definitely, that's ingrained from my mother. My mother always really grounded my realities, always. It was never like, which I think is obviously like an inherent trait from being Black in this world. But also, yeah, I think there's also something I think distinctly, and maybe, I don't know if you agree, but distinctly non-American about that too. Because America is so based on dreaming and reaching big and shooting for the stars, and I think the combination of my mom being from Guyana and then emigrating to England when she was like 20. And England is England is not about dreams. But so I think that combination really, it's like, it's always, kept me quite like realistic. Yeah, there was something I wrote down something that a quote in your book that I really loved, which I think maybe even somewhat speaks to this. You said, there's no trick to this, no deception. It is a continuing in the tradition of Black Americans attempting to protect and enlarge their own narratives. That every word in that sentence like rings so true in my brain. And especially, I think after this year, which is, I think, maybe globally the most time a lot of people have had a chance to like think in general and about maybe their own lives or other people's lives. And that's something that I've been living in a lot, really. Been really trying to live into that. I guess protection, really. Protection of whatever mine and friends and family and people of color, trying to protect our stories, I guess, really.
Yeah, a big thing that's hit me in the past like 13 months is not just the amount of loss, but also the loss of elders and the disruption of lineage. Like untimely loss of elders, right? Of course, we've had some folks like Cicely Tyson, for example, who just lived a good long time and gave a lot in their time, but we've had some untimely losses of folks. And when I say elders, I just mean anyone who's lived a generation above my own, right? Who's kind of absorbed, which is important, right? Because I think for me, it's always important to think through time not as America presents it, but time as a very real construct. Because as America presents it, like everything was a long time ago, right? Like the civil rights movement was a long time ago, or we're not even talking about like this idea that America presents as like slavery happened so long ago, whatever. But like the textbooks and the narratives present any of America's violences as something of the far distant past. But like there are elders in my life. Yeah, right. Like back then. But they're like touchable, there are folks I can touch. There are folks I can hug who lived through these eras. And so with the amount of, we're talking about like loss and preservation, I am thinking about the way that lineage has been disrupted through an untimely amount of loss, or a large amount of loss in the past, 12, 13 months. And who then is the keeper of stories, right? Who then is the keeper of the things that need to be passed down in order to be preserved, so that there is an understanding of a life before this one and what was endured. And this is like not only for tools of resistance for whatever future may come, but also just like sonic storytelling, you know, be it sampling or understanding, you know, where I get so excited. Have you heard the Kelly Rowland EP? Do you listen to that?
No. Wait, there's a new one?
Yeah, it came out on Friday.
Damn, I'm out of the game. I gotta listen to it.
It's incredible. It's really short and it's really incredible. She samples like a Fela joint on it. And like flips it beautifully. And I was so immersed in that because I love sampling. I love sampling as a tool of just like pointing at something and saying, well, that was one thing and now it's this new thing, right?
Yes.
But I have been especially thinking about sound as a method of passing down from the past in contextualizing history.
Yeah. That's real. I love that. That's something that I've always been really, really into, because to me it's just education, really. It's just like a pure education. And I think especially with Black people, I mean, I kind of touched on this recently when I was doing a talk, and I was basically explaining that like a lot of early music I made that had samples or references to things was based from this idea of me just wanting to learn. Like I'm just exploring and I'm just trying to grab things and learn from stuff. And as I've gotten older, and especially in the last couple of years, when I've seen that there are people now listening to things I make, it's not so much now that I'm not picking stuff like intentionally just to like show people, but I do have a thing in the back of my head where I don't want to be irresponsible, and I am aware that the same way I had like some doors open for me from exploring things, that's a possibility now. Like it's at a point where that could happen with someone looking at or exploring something I've done. And I think in terms of us educating and continuing, it's because, you know, as we all know, like white people aren't going to do it. You know, they're not going to help out. So I think it is really important. And sampling is something that I have such a, which maybe some people don't even know, but like I have such a deep love for that art form.
I think about disco a lot, right? And how the narrative of disco was like shaped by, or what I understood about disco coming up, like before I got into like the record collections of my elders and whatnot, was just that disco was not cool. Because the idea of the American idea around disco was shaped by white folks, and it was really steeped in this homophobia and this racism and all these things, right? And I think about that often because these are people who are like fighting to get Donna Summer off the radio. You know what I mean? And we're talking Donna Summer, right? Like Donna Summer is brilliant. And so the legacy of an entire genre of music that was just massively influential in Black communities and communities of color and queer communities, and that still sonically is influential today. Like I think what I'm mostly saying is I think putting forth your influences in a way that recontextualizes those influences and sends people back with a new appreciation to the original art is really vital in a musical landscape that was shaped without the best interest of marginalized creators in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I fully agree.
I guess I haven't listened to a lot of disco lately, but I, you know, like coming up, I loved it, and I was so confused by the way I was made to understand it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny even now. I mean, that's something that's still. I think a lot of people. You could say the same thing about like techno too. Like I think a lot of people don't realize where it's from and the importance of it, and exactly what you said, like how white people shaped the perception of what this thing is. to everyone. Yeah, and then I guess if you want to go even deeper, then how white people then made tons of money off of it.
Right.
After, you know, like after they've like kind of like shut it down, told everyone it sucks, and you know, stolen it from people of color and queer people, then presented it and just made like a shit.
Can we get Saturday Night Fever?
Yeah, you know. Isn't he? I mean, I might have to go back because I haven't seen him in an extremely long time, but I'm pretty sure he's like kind of homophobic in that film.
Oh yeah.
Like I'm almost certain there's like a moment.
Yeah, there's at least 2 moments, I think. How do you you know, in working on Little Devil in America too, a big part of what I was thinking about was like the self-determination, like Black artists' abilities to self-determine so that they can lessen, you know, I think there's a way that our work will always be lensed that, or a lens that'll be viewed through that is entirely beyond our control. Because that's just the job, right? You put work into the world and then it becomes the world, and then you're kind of just like, you know, it is what it is. But how do you find yourself communicating your intentions as clearly as you did on a project like Negro Swan, for example, which like, I mean, I think a lot of the projects conceptually are fully realized, but that was when we're so like, okay, the intentions are very clear here.
Yeah.
Like, is that something you fall into as a project comes along, or do you, in the beginning, like have a whiteboard, have a plan laid out, and then run into it with that plan in mind?
Well, actually, yeah, that album is really, it's kind of funny because, so it was kind of a 2-year period. The first thing I had in regards to the album, which I wasn't sure if it was an album, was the title. The title was before absolutely everything, which kind of does happen quite often, but that one in particular. And then I have a book. I had like a giant like notebook, which I just kept for 2 years, like the notebook and a hard drive, and basically the title, and then started writing a lot of words, trying to understand what those 2 words in conjunction with each other, what they even mean. Because essentially at the beginning, it was just phonetic nice. And then it was trying to go a little deeper into it. From there, I did a lot of writing, and anything in my life that came into my mind or that I saw that I liked or was inspiring, I took note of it. I wrote it down, and I would print out images and just like stick them in the book, or like 2 words, I'll just write the words down. Just every single thought that came into my head. From there, I was like working on little bits of music, and I would have imagery and video things. So I started filming videos at the same time as working on music. Some videos were completely shot before the songs were even finished, or even like close to finished. But it would then help me finish the songs. And even with the artwork, I remember of my label, when I finally told them there was kind of an album and they were trying to get, for obvious reasons, artwork. And I told them I don't have artwork, but I know that there was a video called Jewelry. And I was like, but I'm certain, because I know it's all connected, that when I'm shooting the video, I'll be able to get the artwork. So it was funny of that, because essentially the music came last, in theory. I mean, there's bits and stuff happening, but really the absolute last thing to do with all of it was music.
It's like I mean, I think all the time about how the visions in my head for my work, or especially for the aesthetics, are rarely executed as cleanly as I want. But you know, the cover, I'm very hands-on with my book covers because I just really believe in that process. And the cover of Little Devil was so challenging to land on in terms of how do we get this how do we find a photo that tells a story about what's happening inside the book? And how do we find I knew early on it was gonna be a photo. I was like, I wanted kind of like paintings and drawings. And I went so deep into these archives. At first there was a photo of Josephine Baker that we loved, or that I loved, but that was maybe too, like I couldn't figure out how to have a book title pulled from a Josephine Baker speech and have a photo of Josephine Baker on the cover and convince people like this is not a book solely about Josephine Baker. We just like couldn't make the math work. And then we were kind of cycling through all these photos of Black dancers, and I knew that I wanted to find a picture that caught two people in the throes of pulling off something that they once maybe thought was impossible, right? In the Lindy Hop, like these Lindy Hop aerials provided all kinds of examples of that. And this photo of Willa Mae Rickard and Leon James, where she's kind of like looking at him like she cannot believe what's happening. I feel like I dreamed that photo to life. You know what I mean? Like while writing the book and while like crawling towards the book, this idea of celebrating the limitless nature of Black performance in all of its shapes and forms, right? It was, and so in some ways I feel you in terms of the scaffolding for the creation coming before the creation itself, or aligning in a way where it's like, I close my eyes and I see this fully executed thing before I'm even like fully ready to receive it. Yeah.
Did you set out to write about like Black performance, Black dance and how it relates? Or was it more you noticed maybe amongst writings of yours?
So I set out, in the book that I like initially sold to Random House was a book about minstrelsy and a book about like the history of minstrel shows and about appropriation. And then halfway through writing it, I'm a big Toni Morrison disciple. I love Toni Morrison a great deal. When we lost her, I spent a lot of time thinking about this very real concept that she presented that revolves around the idea of Black writers divorcing themselves from the idea of whiteness entirely, like in totality, right? To remove the specter of whiteness from one's work and then ask oneself, how much more limitless can the work become? And so I was writing about minstrel shows and I was writing about appropriation. And then I kind of threw away half the book because I began to ask myself a question of how much better would this book be if the hovering threat and fear of a performance that could be stolen was gone, right? If this wasn't about like white soul singers appropriating Motown and instead was about the nuances of the background singer living on their own terms, or was about the playing of spades, these kind of, it allowed me to drill down into redefining what I believe performance to be it just movement or emotional performance, or in the broader scope, the way that the folks I know talk to each other, like how like regional Black dialect is also a performance, right? But I did set out, so when I decided to take the book in a slightly different direction, the essay that opens it about Soul Train and about the dance marathons, that was always going to be the direction. Because a homie of mine was like, have you heard about these Great Depression era dance marathons? And I was like, no, I'm writing a book about Black dance or Black movement. I don't know if like Great Depression era dance marathons is going to be the move for me. But then he sent me this folder of photos from them where the people are kind of like holding each other up, and where people are like holding a mirror for the person they're dancing with. And it got to the heart of what I was actually trying to get at in the broader Soul Train piece, which was about love, about like affection for a chosen partner or a partner who is chosen for you in a moment of movement. And so the book changed a lot as it evolved, but that piece that opens it was always the anchor piece.
I've read a lot of your stuff, and I really love in this book particularly, it feels so, I don't know how to explain it. Almost like, I don't know, like diaristic, like it feels like a diary.
Yeah.
Diary entries, like I mean, I've still do this, but especially when I was younger, a lot of writers, if there was a writer I was trying to get into, and if I found that their work was maybe like a little too dense for me, I would always try and search out like their letters or their journals, that were
Yeah.
made.
Yeah.
But I feel like you do this really amazing job of both in one. You really create like such a clear path for people to explore explore your writing and like the wonderful ways that you twist and turn. It's so poetic. It's really incredible and very especially nowadays, like it's very, very pleasant to read.
Thank you. I think it's because I have to detach myself from the idea that I'm writing for an audience, right? Like, I think I can like do that in some ways because in my brain, I'm not thinking about the many people who might read it, which is why, and I mean, I came up as someone who also kind of liked reading the personal correspondences of writers because I feel like that is when I got a grasp for who a writer was. Like when I could see them as they were writing to someone they loved or as they were writing to only themselves. And it's hard to stay in that mode, I think, when writing a book that you know is going to be at least sold as something that many people can access. But I think in my brain, I got to stay in that. I have to stay in that mode because like, otherwise I don't think if I consider audience too much, then by default, I'm going to start considering accessibility, which for me is like a roadblock. The minute that word appears in bright lights in my head, it's just a roadblock to whatever I am capable of at my best.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. I feel the exact same way about making music. It's I can't even like consider that. I mean, it's part of what I've never read a Blood Orange review, and then that's part of it because I can't even go down that road.
You've never read a Blood Orange review? Not one?
Not one.
Are you at least aware of how the albums are received though?
Well, now I am, just because of how much consumption in the world and how people take in music has changed.
Right.
So that's one of the most interesting, if I was to say what the most interesting part of having made music for the amount of time and the time period that I have made music, it's the fact that I've like made music from a period where you release something and people maybe don't hear it. Also, I guess more people are listening, but people maybe wouldn't hear it for like a few months. Like, the first couple of Blood Orange records, like maybe someone who even saw themselves as a fan maybe didn't hear it for like a few months. Like it was just a different thing. And then even when they did hear it, they heard it. There was no need to share that they've heard it, and also no way to share that they've heard it. I've seen that now change through the last, I know, like 12 years or so. And the fact that it's been in conjunction with more people listening to music I make, it's been very interesting. So because there was a period where I didn't know what people essentially thought my music until I played shows. It's very different now. It's like, it's everything's so instant, and so people listen, and then people leave comments, and people like repost, and so I now I do have a sense. The last couple records, I have an idea of how they've been received in the world or music world or whatever. I still can't justify a reason though for me to read a review of my music.
Right. Yeah. That's never really made sense to me. But I do know writers, and I know musicians, and I know art makers who kind of like need to be grounded in the assessment of their own work, which I suppose I I understand why someone would go down that road, but I'm not the one for that.
Yeah.
So a thing that I've been thinking about, and I talked about with another musician I know, was about how we're kind of not in the same era as the, like, say 60s or so, where, you know, there was just like a person you could call if you needed someone to lay down a guitar, like in one or two takes, someone you could call at any hour of the night, just come in and collaborate with, and it would be perfect, and you just knew it. It feels like that is less common, but it does feel like you occupy an interesting space collaboratively as a person who people just like call on to enhance a song or an album or a moment. Do you ever think of yourself as kind of like someone who is equally gifted at making music through their own vision, and as someone who's just like an interpreter of someone else's vision?
You know, I've never made anything that I don't like, that isn't to my taste, because for me personally, there isn't another reason why Blood Orange exists. All it is, and that goes for videos and stuff too, is really just trying to make things that in my head I think are cool. And also seeing if I can even do it. I have a real love for people that are masters of their craft. I have like such a deep love and a deep respect for that. And that goes beyond music too. So it's always interesting, because a lot of the times, I mean, I'd say like 80% of the time, if in my music I've played every instrument, it's because it was just me and it was easier. But when there's other people, it's really because I'm excited there's other people around, and someone else that has a different brain and who's a master of what they do. And I just want to explore that. I'm just so curious about the different reactions that can exist between people combining, and especially people combining who one of them has like a next level brain on what they do.
And this is my last thing, but this has been like burned into my brain since we talked about the score that you did this summer. If you could, like, let's say a 5-song EP that you could make with one artist who you fully believe in the chemistry you have with them, you know, kind of like a Watch the Throne situation, but I'll limit it to like a 5-song EP, because I know it's not like it's not a burdensome undertaking, but it's like let's get together in the studio for like 2 days, churn out these 5 songs. Who's the artist you would link up with? Is this putting you on a spot in a bad way?
No, it's good. I mean, funny, it's good because the question that usually gets asked people is like, who would you collaborate in the world with? But what you're asking is so more specific and like, you know, like so rap almost, you know, that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what the name of the Linkin Park Jay-Z record was.
Collision Course.
Okay, thanks. I was trying to. Okay, fire. Absolute fire. That encore in the end mashup was like so legendary. Holy shit. Okay, it sounds like kind of like a no-brainer, but I think Mariah Carey.
Oh yeah.
I think that would be, yeah. And the main reason I pick her, beyond the fact that she's Mariah Carey, you know, like besides like that, is that you know, I think there was like one other thing that we kind of like toyed around with, but besides that, it was really just that that one song that we spent like a few days working on for her record. And so in terms of people that I've collaborated with before, but we've only made one thing, but within that, I felt like my brain fucking like got ripped apart and expanded, and like I learned so much from being around her and seeing her work. Yeah, I would say her just because I feel like I would like fucking like leave Super Saiyan or something.
I will listen to that. I hope that comes to life. Deb, this was dope, man. This was this was really fulfilling and great, and I appreciate you taking the time.
Oh my God, likewise. It's such a pleasure. And I'm so stoked. I'm gonna hit you when I finish. I'm still like working my way through it, but it's incredible. It's like perfect for right now.
Thanks for spending time with it, truly.
Thanks for writing it.